I find it extremely interesting to talk about the evolution of sales in general, even more so in my chosen profession of automotive sales. But how did this come about, and why is there so much focus on an evolution? And it is out there, and I think a lot of companies, dealerships are looking that way. It's been forced upon us. It's been played for us with all of the data that has been made available over the last nearly generation now. So it's been quite a long time. But you think about it, when the internet first came out, even prior to that, there were consumer advocacy publications, Consumer Reports, what have you, that had a lot of this information, or so-called information, that was not accurate. The same thing is now, except that now we need to take this evolution or this idea of data to a whole new level, because there's gobs of it. There are companies that are giving people other sources to purchase a product. Obviously, you have big companies like Amazon doing a lot of different things online, but I'm talking about the sales industry, where we used to make calls, go in person. We have the one-on-one that doesn't seem to happen so much anymore. And I'll tell you what, there's hardly any worse form of communication than a text or an email. In fact, maybe tribal drums, smoke signals might be worse, but you don't have any of that interaction, at least, and you don't have any of that even that you get on the phone, with a little bit of tone of voice and that. But getting back to this data, there's a new step, there's a new part of the sales process that we have to recognize and focus upon, and that's the interpretation of data. And why do we say that? Because there's so much of it out there, there's so many different sources out there, and a lot of it is in error, a lot of it is wrong, and consumers also, what do? They read it wrong and they jump to bad conclusions based on that. So they don't really understand how to interpret the data, but they believe they do, and mostly when it's advantageous to them. Kind of like we would do when we're selling a product. We try to find things that support our product to build value. It makes perfect sense. Well, the consumer's trying to do the opposite, and we have to steer them straight. When they get off the road to the sale, we have to bump them back onto the road to the sale. Now, how do we do that? It goes back to interpretation of data. I did a workshop a couple of weeks ago that I spoke a lot about interpretation, because that does have to be part of the process now. That has to be an ongoing part of the process, is interpretation of data, because they're going to read in all kinds of things, see all kinds of information, and utilize that to decide whether or not there's value there. They're not going to listen to us until they become receptive to our words, and I can tell you how to get there, but it's kind of interesting the way that's come about and what we need to do to counter it. So think about that. Now, how can we start to interpret data? Now, we have to do it before we actually present numbers, whether it be on a sales call or in the dealership. We have to do it before we do that, because they've already got this set in their head. And if we haven't nudged them back or planted seeds of doubt and helped them understand that, hey, my interpretation might be off just a bit, because this place is doing a lot of business, they're selling a lot of things for this dollar, why is that? And then they need to rely upon us to tell them why. But if we start planting seeds with something I like to call a preemptive strike, although, like I said, it's not as harsh as that, it's a positive value statement used very early in the process to start nudging them toward your idea of what a value should be. In other words, what type of money they should pay for your product. And I know everybody says, well, we always build value. I understand that. But now the customer has to believe that what you're saying is more factual than what they've read or heard. And I always ask customers that, what have you read or heard that led you to a different figure or a different idea, and what would that be? It's not wrong to ask a customer that. Ask them what they're targeting. Ask them what their expectations are. Utilize little different words. Maybe it's semantics or whatever, but here's the thing. If you ask them what they want to pay, what they budget, they expect that to happen. If you don't give them the idea that, hey, maybe they're going to see more value, they're going to want to pay more because in the long run it's going to make them more money back or what have you, or it's going to make them happier, and we continue to build value. But targets can be missed. Okay, expectations might not be met, and it's not the end of the world. But if you go along letting the customer believe, hey, this is going to happen the way my idea is going to happen, well, we got nothing. And we have a difficult time closing the sale or closing business. But sales is fascinating. I said before earlier that it's not a game. I can contradict myself a little bit, but it's kind of a sport, though, when you get it right down to it, when you are interpreting the data, when you're countering, transitioning, and closing, when you're building value using positive value statements, when you're backing off using pullback ideas and statements and warm fuzzies, as I like to call them. You're not literally, but you're wrapping your arms around the customer maybe and giving them a hug when they realize that maybe my interpretation wasn't exactly correct. These are things that you're going to have to do during the process, but this is all an evolution. And the biggest part of the evolution is with all of the information and misinformation, it's not a shell game anymore, or it shouldn't be, or it can't be, or you're going to lose more business than you make if that's how you go about it. There's no smoke and mirrors. Okay, you have to understand that. This is not a magic show anymore. Sales is not magic. It's not sleight of hand. It's all about building value, utilizing the data that's available to the customer, understanding what data is available to the customer, and then using it for our benefit. So it is fascinating. It's wonderful, and I like watching other folks talk about this and listening in, or looking at chat rooms or what have you, or conversations, and seeing exactly some of the feedback that you get on it. But I think more and more folks are going along this line. And it's important to us because that is how the sales they're always going to need a sales professional. Sales isn't going anywhere. As much as they want to online it, I get it. There's certain industries are just going to need that touch or that human touch. But see, we can bring it back. Let me tell you something about that. The reason that we have all this online stuff, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons for companies in my industry like Carvana is because of the practices over the last 4 decades or so, maybe more, that weren't exactly on the level. That was the shell game. We don't need that. Candor builds trust. Think about that. Tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Always agreeing with your customer gets you nowhere. Counter the customer. So that's just a 5 cents worth of philosophy in there. You might not think it's worth that much, but a lot of folks do. But it's a beautiful day out here. Just wanted to touch base and let you know some of my thoughts on some of these. It's just, like I said, it's just so fascinating right now, and it gets to be fun. It gets to be fun what we do in our industry, and I would love to welcome anybody that wants to get into it, to dive in and just learn and be able to understand how things are going to work and how they're going to work in the future and how we can become more valuable as sales professionals. And that's how we're going to evolve, and that's how we're going to get better. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Take care.